স্যার স্যার ওটাও বলে দিন ওই স্যার
Dear participants, our respected and revered speaker of the occasion has joined us. So I welcome you all again to this post-lunch session of day 2 of our workshop. And, we are very lucky to have a legendary academician in the form of Professor Dewan with us to share his views and his ideas with us. And I'm sure that what he would be telling us today would prove to be a milestone in our lives. So please lend your 100% attention to him. And I now invite Hina, the moderator of the session, to introduce Professor Kant to you. Thank you. Please, Hina.
Thank you so much, ma'am. A very good afternoon to everyone, and thank you so much for joining us again. It is my great honor to introduce our speaker, Professor Hridaya Dewan, on the behalf of Department of English and Dr. Hari Singh Gaur University. He is professor in the Azim Premji University, and besides that, he is also associated with Vidya Bhavan Society. After completing his PhD from the University of Delhi, he joined as a lecturer of physics in Kirorimal College for 2 years. Then he served in Eklavya, a voluntary organization committed to educational innovation, for 14 years. He has worked extensively with capacity building of teachers for the last 35 years. He has been a part of team designing pre-service and in-service certificate program for teachers. He has also developed participative and activity-engaging ways of organizing teacher trainings and helped many states to set up processes for the same. As a writer of Hindi as well as English, he has not only been author and co-author of many journals, periodicals, books, and textbooks, but also contributed for many academic and popular publications in educational development. He has been a member of many national and state government committees on curriculum, textbooks, and teacher capacity building. Also, he has been on government boards of organizations working in educational development. The contribution of Professor Dewan is a lot to say, but for now, we are very fortunate enough that today the sir is going to enlighten us on the topic discipline-centric ideas of teaching and learning and the interdisciplinary approach. Without any further delay, I would request sir to kindly address us. Over to you, sir. Sir, your mic is off, so kindly unmute.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, and I am very glad to be talking to you. It's a privilege to speak to people who are teaching, who are researching, who are thinking about the question of how can we make our efforts more meaningful. And I'm also very happy to be part of a program of Sagar Harishankar Gaur University, Sagar. For various reasons, because I spent a lot of time in Madhya Pradesh, and many of my colleagues who were part of the team which worked in Madhya Pradesh came from that university, were students there, had taught there for some time. So I'm really very glad that I'm part of something which the university is hosting. So I try and speak for 15-20 minutes, and then maybe we can think about the questions that emerge from there, and we can take forward. I look forward to your inputs into conversation so that it doesn't remain merely a one-sided address. So when we talk about teaching and learning and discipline-centered teaching and learning, the first question that we need to, of course, think about is what is teaching and what is learning. And in order to think about what is teaching and learning, there is the important issue of what is knowing. So when we teach, there is a certain expectation that the learner will know something. So he'll know something more than what she knew before. So we need to know what is knowing and what does it mean to know. So, and then we'll of course come to think about what is a discipline. So if we look at the three terms, teaching, learning, and discipline, it is then we can start talking about what does disciplinary-centric idea of teaching and learning mean. So there are various ways in which we think about what is knowing. And I'm not going to go into the details of those. I'm sure many of you who teach philosophy and teach knowledge would be able to talk about it better. For the present, I merely want to say that when we say we think we know something, when we are able to do something with the knowledge that we have. In a sense, we are either able to express it, articulate it, or we are able to, based on that knowledge, think of something more or using that knowledge, we are able to construct something. So whatever we know is something that helps us to relate to the world outside, to relate to our own mind, and to relate to others in some manner. And that holds for everything. It holds for knowledge in physics, knowledge in chemistry, knowledge in biology. In some sense, the act of knowing transforms something in us so that we are different from what we were before. So if we look at knowledge in that manner, and if we look at knowing in that manner, then knowing something cannot be holding information, because holding information does not make any change in you. It's just like being able to say something without having it making any difference to you. And therefore, when we think in terms of teaching and learning, we need to think of it in terms of a manner that it incorporates a process which changes your way of relating to the world in some manner. It's not merely adding some information to your memory house. So if I take examples from early learning, which we will all relate to, therefore the ability to recite the alphabet, or the ability to recite the tables, or the counting sequence is not something which adds to anything that you know. Similarly, then later, if you say that I know the Newton's laws of motion, or I know what is relativity, which Einstein talked about, then that means you know that how the Newton's law affect what you observe in the world, or you understand the implications of the fact that there is relativity in motion, and that light in its motion has a special characteristics which limits the fact that if it is in a different frame of reference, it yet carries on with the same velocity to any observer. So it is not the fact that I have the information that we are talking about, but the fact that that knowledge is something that I can act upon, I can act with. So the teaching learning process, therefore, that would be something which helps you engage with the world, engage with the concepts in a manner that you are able to build on it. So whether it is a discipline-centric teaching or whether it is any other kind of teaching, it must necessarily require you to act on something. So, people call it by different manner. They say it is a problem-solving approach. They can call it the project method. They can call it the constructivist approach, or they can call it discovery-based approach. In all that, the important thing is not what is the name. The important thing is the fact that in the process of teaching and learning, there is an engagement of the learner in actually thinking of something on her own and finding a way forward in relating to the concepts to be learned with what she already knows. So it is that, therefore, that is essential for a teaching learning process. Now, if we look at teaching and learning knowledge and we look at the human mind, so we also know that the human mind is eternally curious. We have, as in our processes of learning, discovered many things. And because of the unique facility that we have language, we also have the wherewithal and capability of sharing that knowledge with the next generation, with others, so to speak. There is more possibility of cooperative functioning. And I mean, many people have pointed out that the human being has these features because of many biological reasons, and because of the biological reasons and the historical development of the evolution of the human beings, we have come to a point because of the point where we have our ability to be cooperative, the ability to engage with each other, the ability to share information, to build on concepts, and to kind of think of create new ideas has become far more than any other animal on the planet. There have been many studies, there have been many arguments that are human beings special in any manner. And while we started with this homocentric view of the world, we have often challenged that that particular way of looking at the world, and we find that the world has a lot of variety of animals who have different kinds of abilities, but the human being, because of this ability to cooperate and collaborate with each other, and because of the need to do that, has developed this ability to use language and to build ideas, to construct ideas, and to share these ideas. And that has led to a pool of knowledge which constantly grows, and that we have found ways of storing it, of making it available to a vast number of people, has also meant that the amount of knowledge that the collective human beings have is a lot. And if you look at the fact that when we are in a small group, our family or at home, the knowledge that you get is about the immediate surroundings around you. You are able to abstract from your surrounding some concepts because you are able to speak about something that happened before. You are able to speak about something that you think is likely to happen. You are able to speak about the past. All that is there, but yet you are limited in your exposure to what you can see. It is very difficult for you to imagine things which are not part of your experience. But as we started sharing across continents, across geographies, and we started experiences different things, and we started collaborating with distant communities, we increased the kind of experience-based vicariously, and therefore had more broader, wider, more abstract concepts to deal with. So when we look at something in our daily routine, initially human societies, as well as a young child, we look at it in its entirety. We look at it as a complete phenomenon. So therefore, it is, and we look at it in terms of the very concrete characteristic of that particular object. But as we start gathering more and more of those experiences, we start gathering them in different situations, we see patterns which are not linked to specific situations but are more general. But that more general patterns are pieces of the entire whole. So the entire whole is not identical at each time, but there are pieces in it which are similar. For example, if you take a simple thing like an object which has four sides. Now, a particular object whose face has four sides looks very similar to an object which has another object which has four sides. But these objects are not identical because they may have different colors, they may have different shapes. In terms of the amount of surface they cover, they may have even have different kind of materials that they are built on. And so therefore the face, which is, it looks like a four-sided figure, may have many different kinds of possibilities. But yet the four-sidedness has one important characteristics, that all the sides have, all these faces have four sides. Now, you can look at it in all different kinds of experiences that you have. You start thinking about moving objects, and then you start saying, okay, this moves, and then it stops. Something else you push moves, and then it stops. And if you move a round object, it moves for a longer distance. If you move a flatter object, it moves for a shorter distance. And then you start thinking about, okay, what is it to do with the shape? Is it to do with something else? And then you try and isolate those aspects which make the characteristics, that particular characteristic which makes the difference in that particular situation. So we come to the fact that there are specific parameters, specific concepts which determine how a pattern, how different things behave. So there is a pattern that you see, and that abstraction and that particular element, when you identify, then you say, okay, this is what it leads to. So in that entire picture, you say, okay, that life is determined by these 4 or 5 vital forces. So in that definition, you are trying to generalize the experience that you have had, the kind of abstractions you are able to make into some kind of a pattern which explains all that you know at that point of time. So our initial ideas about the world were not discipline based. They were about the whole, they were about the phenomena, they were about and in this there was a lot of element about thinking about things which were, linking it to some forces, linking it to some kind of processes which were unknown. And as our knowledge grew, as we were able to identify more and more patterns, our nature of what we knew, the nature of how we described it changed. So we went into an overall thinking about knowledge to also thinking about how we know something. So knowledge has always been a question of convincing the other person as well about what you know. So how do you know what I know? How do I know what I know? How can I tell you that what I know is correct? So in that process, there are different ways of identifying what will be accepted as knowledge by the human society. And these were initially philosophically identified. And so philosophy was in a way, and theology and philosophy were in a way the entire spectrum of knowledge that human beings occupied. But gradually, as we started thinking more, we started also trying to separate out the basis of determining knowledge as being acceptable or non-acceptable. So you started coming to disciplines. So you said that, okay, there is something which is about interacting with the world, which has a physical reality, which is different from the other knowledge. So there is you came up with this epistemic basis of thinking about material objects and their behaviors. So you said you started thinking about science, and then there was a whole debate about what is science, what is the scientific method, what classifies itself as science, and the superiority of science over other forms of knowledge, So for many centuries, science became the dominant discipline, and the scientific method became a very critical idea of how we should proceed in our knowledge acquisition. So disciplines start coming into being as our knowledge becomes categorized. It starts being put into some kind of a compartments of how we acquire and accept knowledge. Similarly, if we take history, the historical knowledge is accepted and incorporated into human minds very differently. The kind of rigor and the kind of analysis that historians put to each other's questions and statements is very different from the way scientists do. So what will be acceptable in science as a proof would not be the same for history or for geography or for sociology. They're very different in nature, and while each of them learn from each other, and that we will also think about, but the important thing is that each of them has a special characteristics and a special way of accepting knowledge as being established or non-established. So then we start asking the question, how do you define a discipline? Because science, if you take science, for example, science, as I said, has an epistemic basis. And we'll come to that, what is the epistemic basis of science? How valid is the current science explorations based on that epistemic basis? And what have been the debates and conversations around science in the recent years as science has developed into realms which are far beyond the concrete and the tangible that we see in front of us. Then we ask the question, is a discipline defined by the lexicon does it use? So is it the terminology that we use that is specific to particular discipline? Because science would of course use certain kinds of words, it would use certain kind of expressions. So is it the lexicon and the syntax that the science uses? And can you identify a piece of knowledge by the way it is expressed and the kind of language it uses? Or is it defined by the system which governs the knowledge that is generated in that field? Or is the discipline defined by the way it is practiced? So is science defined by the way science is practiced? So is therefore technology a part of science or is it not a part of science? Is the mathematics that has come out because of the need of science, calculus, numerical analysis, is that science or is that not science? So in that sense, if we look at the discipline itself, the discipline itself starts looking like an area which requires interrogation and thinking. And if you go further, now we have disciplines. Would we say that particle physics is a discipline, high energy physics is a discipline, solid state physics is a discipline, or physics is a discipline? Or that each of them are subparts of a discipline? So when we say a discipline-centric idea of teaching and learning, we need to kind of think about the question as to first, what is the thing that we will identify as a discipline? As specialization increases and the number of areas in which you can spend your life exploring decrease, it becomes very difficult to separate precisely what the idea of a discipline would be. And that is what makes it's very important for us to think about when we say we are teaching physics, or we are teaching solid state physics, or we say that I'm doing research in evolutionary theory. Then is that a discipline that we are talking about, or is it the fact that we are working in an area of knowledge which we are defining in a way by the key concepts that incorporated. So I am saying this because we have started thinking about knowledge as being narrowly confined to particular disciplines. We have started looking at knowledge in particular disciplines, and those disciplines have got narrow and narrow, and we all laugh in our own way that the present in older time, the doctor used to be, you go to a doctor, he could look at you and he could assess your entire body, and now you go to a doctor for each of the things. There is a doctor for the little finger on your left toe, on your left foot, and a doctor for the thumb on your right foot. So because they are so specialized and they are so narrow in what they know, and of course deep in that area, but their ability to look at the whole human body has decreased. So therefore the point about discipline centrism also needs to be interrogated in that manner, that if we say discipline centric, then what is the boundary that you define the discipline to be? And that boundary, by the way, is not very clear, and there is only, we go by certain accepted general notions which are not very rigorously maintained and defined even in our conversations. So what I'm trying to argue, therefore, is that when we say discipline-centric idea of teaching and learning, the first question that we need to ask ourselves is that can we say that if we have a discipline-centric idea of teaching and learning, what are we talking about? So are we saying that if I teach in a physics classroom, the only thing I should be doing is talk about physics? If I do that, then if I take, for example, teaching about physics, then force, for example, in physics, then would I talk about muscular force or not talk about muscular force? Would I like to distinguish between the common perception of muscular force and the errors that emerge from it in using that idea in daily life, which a child may? Similarly, if you take evolution, for example, am I going to talk about the chemistry of the cell and the kind of chemical processes that accelerate mutation, and what its role in evolution has been, and therefore to try and understand the conditions that may affect evolutionary processes, and how we can see evolutionary processes in a small time scale by creating conditions in which mutations happen faster, and you can see what is the impact of those mutations on the colony. So what I'm trying to say is, therefore, the point about discipline-centric teaching and learning can only be that you can communicate information, and you can communicate information that is in terms of definitions and explanations. You cannot have a discipline-centric idea of teaching and learning which allows the student to explore, to think, and to bring in the kind of notions that she may have about the particular concept, the particular phenomena from her experiences. Because if we allow that, if we allow the mind of the learner to have a space, then the mind of the learner, the mind of any human being will think about connections which may be in the strictest sense of the boundary that you have drawn for the discipline to be outside it. So what I'm saying is that, therefore, if we look at disciplinarity, then it is only defined by the questions that we ask and the methods that we use. So when we say that I am teaching physics, then you are saying that I am teaching a set of questions which have to be explored by a certain set of methods, and I will limit the questions and the methods to what is defined in a certain sense as a body of knowledge which is existing in the physics textbooks. But as a person who wants to do physics and wants to explore new knowledge, or as a person who's learning those particular ideas, for all that to make sense to that person, it is necessary that the person goes outside the boundary of what is set by the material given in the textbook, or the material in the mind of the teacher who is engaged with the responsibility of sharing with the student. So therefore, if I need my classroom to allow questions that arise in the mind of the students to be transacted as a part of the process, then necessarily my classroom has to be unbounded from the strict disciplinarity that anyone may impose on it. So therefore, what I'm trying to again point out to you that it is therefore important to recognize that when we say discipline-centric, we are talking about a process in which problem solving and independent thinking and creation and exploration are not an integral part. Because if these are integral parts of the process of transaction, then it will necessarily lead to boundaries which will be transgressed. For example, if you take for any simple experiment, there will be in trying to understand why that happens, the minds will naturally flow to ideas which are outside that the boundary of the discipline. For example, there is this take the growth of a plant, and you want to start thinking about the way plants grow, or the way how the even generations change because of gene structure. There is this very clear answer that we know, which we can communicate that this happens because of this. But if for a moment we step back and look at the data itself, and we said, this is the data, now how do I analyze it? How do I see that in one generation, this is the kind of plants I get. In the second T2 generation, this is the kind of this is the kind of plants I get. And in the F3, this is the kind of plant. So there can be many other possible theories that you can come up with. And those theories may not lie within the genetic conceptual framework. They may be outside it. They may have to do with the chemical nature of the soil. It may have to do with the fact that plants leave something behind in the soil, and therefore the generational change. So you will have to therefore then go into the asking new questions, doing new kind of studies to try and see whether there are any other factors which can explain the same thing as has been explained by the dominant and recessive genes. So any open-ended exploration therefore would necessarily step outside the boundaries of the particular concept and also outside the boundaries of the discipline. And therefore there is a lot of talk these days about interdisciplinary teaching and learning, and there is also talk about interdisciplinary research. So if you look at the way I have looked at discipline, there is an inherent interdisciplinarity in whatever we do. Anyone who is doing research in any one particular branch of science would recognize that in the process of doing that, if you're doing some experimental physics, for example, you're bound to get into some metallurgy, you're bound to get into some other areas of chemistry in order to set up what you want to set up. If you're doing something in biology, you're bound to get into something in chemistry. You're bound to get into something about physics because you have to kind of maintain temperatures. So any application-based research in the lab would require you to step outside of these or the particular discipline, and we do it naturally. So in that sense, there is interdisciplinarity already there. But the current emphasis on interdisciplinarity is because of another purpose. It also is probably challenging us to ask new questions. It's challenging us to try and say that, well, our knowledge is no longer, we are no longer attempting to answer questions which are of wider concern and which influence human minds, human bodies, the world in a larger way. We're not addressing the entire phenomena. We have started addressing only the limited pieces. So it is an attempt to try and rectify the extreme movement that has happened over the last 80 years, 100 years into these specific narrow silos of disciplines, and those disciplines have become specialized and super specialized, so that we are not able to look at the whole. So we are, there is therefore a demand to try and make the knowledge, make the specialization less narrow, and make the whole way we look at subjects differently. And the idea is that because we don't look at these things in a wider way, we miss the entire point. It's like, and many people have described this narrowness of view in different ways. You can take the view of Arjun, where you say that, well, I will only look at the eye because that's the focus. Or you can look at the other way, that you are holding the ear of the elephant, and somebody is holding the leg, or somebody is holding the trunk, somebody is holding the tail, and each of the person is describing the elephant in different ways. So you realize that whichever way you go, knowing the world would require both. It will require the precision of the Arjun, where you will only focus on that particular thing that you are looking at. And it also requires the holism, so that you can try to understand what is the whole elephant about. You are not then limited to saying that this trunk is the elephant, or this tail is the elephant, or this ear is the elephant, but the elephant is the composite, and therefore you have to build these different pieces together to try and make a picture of the elephant. And therefore there will constantly be a back and forth between discipline centrism and interdisciplinarity. You cannot say that I will only have interdisciplinarity, because interdisciplinary learning requires first the rigor and grounding in particular disciplines and concepts which are rooted in some kind of a clarity and rigor. And it is only based on those that you can construct other things and make interrelationships which extend into the boundaries outside and make newer connections possible, and are able to give you ideas that bring different things together in a manner that has not happened before. So, in a sense, you could look at it in the sense of this. You could look at it in terms of wave and particle, that matter is both a wave and both a particle. So knowledge is both discipline-centric and it is both interdisciplinary, because either of them does not help us understand the world, and it does not help us analyze the world in a manner that makes us move forward. So I'll stop here, and then I will take the questions, and if there is, then we can probably. So I'll need to understand what you pick up and where your questions are, so that I can come back and respond. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a very good session. The session is now open for questions. So we have a question here, that can it be so that specialization is the study of one area in greater depth, which ends up in discovery of interdisciplinary connections?
Yeah. Is there anything else? That I noted that question. Any other question? Take a couple of them together, maybe one.
Sir, can I ask a question, sir? Excuse me. I'm Akhilesh.
Yes, Akhilesh, sir. Please go on.
Thank you. Actually, sir, I'm teaching physics. I'm a physics lecturer at MIT, Manipal. So my question is regarding see, I have attended few other workshops also, and everywhere we learn like teaching, a general conception, general methods about teaching of all the subjects, which are mainly. But sometimes whenever we study a particular subject, we realize that we cannot study the same way the other subjects. Suppose we cannot study the same thing like physics and literature. Both approach of study will be different. And the thing is that whenever we go to teach, we just start teaching subjects. Even when I was a student, these things were mentioned. I mean, we just started, subjects were started. But it is not necessary that first we should spend some time to tell students also how to learn the subject, how to study the subject. We should also emphasize, maybe 1 or 2 classes we should emphasize. And this is not particularly mentioned that physics, even in literature, I also tried to find how to study physics. It is very difficult. And how to appreciate the idea of the subject, even not for physics, for any other subject. Suppose we are studying literature, so we should first try to understand how to study literature or any subject. So then it will be more effective. Like as I saw the title, which you are mainly discussing about the disciplinary teaching. So this way, so this was the thing which many times I have struggled. So my question is mainly that how to, I mean, is this necessary that, what do you feel that should we mention this to students also? And if it is like this, then where to find these techniques? Because the general FDPs or things we get, it is a general discussion.
Yeah, Akhilesh, thank you. Okay, so I'll take these two, then we'll come back to more. Yeah? So first, Purvi's question. What I'm saying is that one area of specialization is perhaps necessary. Not necessary because of the fact that until you know what is to know deeply, it will not be possible for you to explore interconnections which are deep. Now, what does it mean for the undergraduate, postgraduate, and the school students is different from what it means for a researcher. Because if we take an undergraduate student, the undergraduate student would perhaps require a grounding which is multidimensional and also require a grounding which is deep in a certain area. So what I'm trying to say is that in constructing programs of education, you would probably require both. You would require multiple interdisciplinary connections being presented and the students being exposed to engaging with them, and would also certainly require what you are saying, exploring and specializing into one area in greater depth. And I think all good university programs demand that you do some project on one particular area where you investigate some idea very deeply. Now that investigation, however, does not necessarily need to be in one particular discipline. It can be, because disciplines are also formed by the way we have sliced knowledge. If you slice knowledge in a different way, it will lead to a different discipline. And therefore, where I agree with you entirely is that there must be an area of exploration which is deep, which is engaging, and which is challenging, so that the learner knows what does it mean to know and what is the process of knowing something, both. To Akhilesh's question, I would say, there are two things that are important in this. Literature and physics, for example, physics and biology, for example, there is a spectrum of what you want to expose the learner to. At each stage, the learner must see a purpose in doing what she's doing. So the question is not how you learn physics, and the question is not how you learn literature. But the question I think that needs to be interrogated with students is, what is literature about? Why does one need to learn literature? What is it that we can do with literature? And what are their ideas of literature? How do they look at literature? And what has been their experience with literature or with physics? So I think there is a need for the class to engage with the question of what is it that we are doing and why. It cannot be simply the fact that you say that this is the way you learn, because different people will learn different ways. It's not that all of us learn in the same manner. But what is certainly true is that I must have I must recognize why it is important for me to learn, and be able to build on that in some sort of a process of engagement with the classroom. So I must see some relevance of what we are saying, what I'm doing.
So we have one more question here.
Yeah. It's a very, very interesting question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I entirely agree with that. I mean, there are two parts to this, but I think the essential part is that both the understanding of the wider role, the wider dharma, and the understanding of the specific dharma and the specific thing that you're doing, I think both of them are dialectically related. It's not that one is separate from the other. So you learn one more, and if you learn that one well by itself, then the other will automatically also grow. It is not as if you will miss the opportunity to. I mean, all people we look at as having made major contributions have always been people who have kind of excelled in a couple of areas in their own lives. All of us excel in multiple areas, and it is in that excelling and thinking about those areas deeply, we see interlinkages and connections which help us understand those better. I mean, there is an example of how some people think of some kind of shapes to explain the protein structure, or how somebody else to see the way waves and particles are linked. All those kind of come from different fields, and in a sense you apply one's kind of a understanding to other kinds. So I entirely agree with what Chandra is saying, that they are kind of linked to each other, both the specific and the wider. And it is natural. If you go deep into one, you will naturally extend to the other in some manner, unless you are being very mechanical and very, very limited in your exploration of that discipline as well.
Thank you so much, sir. Now,
Dear Professor, I have a question for you.
Yes, Johnson, please go ahead.
Professor, I need to understand about nowadays the transdisciplinary approach, interdisciplinary approach, multidisciplinary approach. How come this is going to help out over in the present scenario? Even in the national education policy, it has been more stressed upon. But could you tell me about this different types of approach, actually?
So, see, to be very honest, I will try and first start with a disclaimer. See, I am not very interested in these terminologies because I feel that they are specializations of a kind which don't interest me. There are people who specialize in it and they work on it. Having said that, I think the national education policy has made two very important claims and suggestions. And I think they relate to the way that they think of knowledge and they think of, so they are talking about class teaching learning process as the effort to make possible learning to learn. No, learning to learn is a term which says that I must empower the person to learn whatever she wants to subsequently. And it's not limited to my communicating a small set or a limited set of concepts or ideas to her. So if we think about in that sense, then what it says about multidisciplinarity and flexibility is that at the stage of secondary or senior secondary, I must be exposed to a multiple way of looking at the world. For two reasons. One, it must make possible for me to choose what is it that I want to go deep into. And secondly, it must already engage me in a manner that I can see knowledge as being not very specifically oriented to one particular area, but recognize that if I do physics, I can also bring in from economics certain parameters. So this one-dimensional human beings that education system is producing, where you are only looking at your own discipline, that is in some senses stopped. And that you come up with a human being who has a sense of all the disciplines, who has a certain kind of humaneness and is able to learn on her own. So I think in that sense, the multidisciplinarity that NEP is talking about is trying to say that, well, let us not produce people who are just one-dimensional. But to the other thing that you say, what is the, what is transdisciplinary, what is multidisciplinary, what is so many other terms. I think they are people who are trying to think through these things in a very, very specialized and narrow way. And there may be something which we can learn from that. But I think for our purposes, I mean, for my purposes, I don't see that much point in it. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would like to invite Dr. Dimple Dubey to propose vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, sir, for the valuable information regarding the understanding of the interrelationship of the disciplinary and the interdisciplinary approach of understanding or knowing a phenomena while trying to gain knowledge. The information while the questions were being generated about the disciplinary approach and the interdisciplinary approach was much to my interest, and someday maybe I would be approaching you once again to have a deeper knowledge of it. Thank you once again, sir, for your valuable time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dimple. And I thank Professor Dewan for such insightful and presented, well-reflected lecture. So we have gained a lot from interaction with you, and we would always crave for such interaction. You ignited minds like you have the power to change the nation and help really in nation building. And so we would be looking forward to listening to you again and again. With this, we come to an end end of the session, the lecture of Hridaya Dewan sir, and we are heading for the next program as we had planned. So now we would be taking up panel discussions. And the topic for panel discussion, as you all are aware, is online teaching, best practices, right? So this is what we had decided that we would be discussing it. We would be taking up a discussion upon what are the best practices which can be followed when we are teaching online, which would really make, online teaching effective, because this is one thing which as teachers, all of us are actually struggling with, how to make online teaching meaningful. So the panelists for discussion today, as the volunteered are Dr. Sunil Saini, Mr. Tajamul Naseem Lone, then Mrs. Sareria Kajal, Dr. Chandralata Singh, Mrs. Kiran Bala, Mrs. Vaini, Mrs. C. Jhansi Rani, and Dr. Minati Rani. So, one of the problems with this online teaching is that if we all unmute ourselves, simultaneously, then it becomes very difficult for others to listen. So to resolve this issue, to help with this, what we'll be doing is we'll be taking the discussions one by one. You have to make your points, and once all of you have spoken, then the house would be open for further questions and answers and discussions. So first I would invite Dr. Sunil Saini. Sunil Saini sir, please unmute yourself and share with us your ideas about what best practices should be followed while teaching. And while you are speaking, sir, please introduce, all of you, please introduce yourself before you speak so that we know from where you come. Okay, so Dr. Sunil Saini. I believe there is some network issue at the end of Dr. Sunil. So, Dr. Chandralata, are you there? Dr. Chandralata Singh, or Mrs. Kiran Bala?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, madam, please make your point.
Yes, okay. Should I on?
Yeah, you please. If it is okay with you, please switch the camera on.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Right, Dylan? Good evening, everybody. This is Dr. Chandralata Singh, and presently I'm teaching or associated with Business Management Department of Dr. H.S. Kaur, Central University, Sagar, and I have been in teaching profession since 1997, or I am associated with Business Management Department of the university, and I have been in teaching since 1997. So almost I am having 20 years of teaching experience here, and I'm very thankful to Vandana madam for giving me opportunity to share my thoughts on best practices in online teaching, and including me in the panel of discussion for today in this FDP. Thank you very much. And I have not prepared much regarding that, but I was, because we are busy in taking classes, and we have so many short of duties nowadays. So especially online teaching, so we are all the time we are connected with our mobile for this, delivering this kind of lecture or attending this kind of workshop or seminar. So I would say that I tried to, we are facing a lot of problems as far as online teaching is concerned. So I was just going through the internet, and we know it is very good idea to surf anything and search whatever you want to. Google Guru is there. So I just want to share. There are 10 best practices I discover in online teaching methods, or I will be giving the material to all of you, and we will be I will be giving one idea on which we can discuss, and it will be open to all of you. So I will let us start, and let us Vandana madam, can I share the my material on this?
Go ahead, madam. No problem.
Okay. So I'm sharing my screen, but I was not having the time to.
Madam, one thing, just one thing, madam. Actually,
Yeah.